I have two Bigfoot encounters that I want to share with you tonight. So just get comfortable, get relaxed, fix you a plate of food, warm up some leftovers from last night, sit down, clip your toenails, pick your teeth, whatever you do when you sit there in the recliner. I don't care, because this is all free and it doesn't cost you a dime. And if you don't like these stories, I'll give you your money back. All right, here we go. Our farm consists of about 600 acres. It is old and has been used by my kinfolk since Mississippi was still only a U.S. territory. It's mostly planted in longleaf pines now. More than half the property consists of hardwood bottomlands with a very large creek flowing through the length of the bottom hardwood swamp. One side of the property connects to the vast forests of the Choctaws' fabled Oclachito or Shimpe, and the other side of the property connects to the storied fields, farms, and forests of the creature my grandparents would occasionally mention, the Stratton Booger. So with adequate setting, here are the encounters. Whooping is not advised. If you have these creatures living in your area, they will react to it. They may not have the wherewithal to come directly to your house, but they will stay in the shadows in and about your yard. I learned this the hard way. On a dare from my cousin, and after listening some Bigfoot hunters do random whoops on the internet, I emulated them from the imagined safety of my backyard for about 3 days in a row. That third night, my 3 big dogs wanted to get in the house. They didn't do their usual scratch and whine either. They went from window to window really trying to get into the house that night. They woke my daughter and she would let them inside. At the time, I thought they were afraid of an old bull raccoon that liked to come and eat their dog food. But it wasn't a one-night event. It began to happen night after night. After a week of this craziness, I decided to get my high-powered LED flashlight one night at about midnight and walk about my 5-acre wooded yard with my dogs to show them that they needed to be brave. Our house sits off the road a good bit, and it's not easy to see from the road. We have no street lights. I have a bright chicken house bulb shining from my yard, and otherwise we have a couple of floodlights on the eaves of my house. But this night the moon and stars lit the sylvan undergrowth. That's when I smelled it, about 40 yards from my house. I thought my dogs had killed another raccoon, or that my septic tank was venting strong odors again. But then a large branch cracked against a big pin oak tree. I saw the thick branch fly against the tree. The branch was about 6 inches in diameter, and it broke in two when it hit the big 2-foot diameter oak. Then the dogs immediately stampeded back to the house. There I was in my t-shirt, boxer shorts, and ball cap and flip-flops, looking at perhaps a 10-foot tall shadow. It was maybe 15 yards from me in my side yard area that's thickly wooded and a regular wildlife thoroughfare. It was breathing. I could see the rise and fall of what appeared to be shoulders. After about 10 seconds, I heard a loud buzzing around my head. It was not a big horsefly, I could tell. It felt like a hummingbird, if you've ever experienced being buzzed by a hummingbird. I turned and jogged to the house. Flip-flops and running don't go together, and the dogs almost made me fall as they ran beneath my legs to get in the door. After slamming the kitchen door shut, I noticed a large, bald-faced hornet, as big as my thumb, trying to pop itself through our kitchen glass. Every time I moved from window to window, the hornet followed me, loudly popping its large white face on the glass directly at my head. I think it would have punished me with its stinger for the midnight ruckus if I were to have opened the door and let it in. After about 15 minutes, I watched it fly away toward and over an eave floodlight and toward the woods from where I had just run. The rest of that night was quiet. This happened about a month ago. I don't know the correlation between the hornet and the dark figure, but maybe there is one. Maybe there was a small hornet's nest being used as some sort of weapon. Who can say? Several weeks have passed, and after an initial period of letting the dogs sleep in the kitchen, they've gotten progressively braver and braver. At first, they stayed beneath the lighted porch. Now, the oldest male makes his nightly bed out into the yard a bit. I've refrained from whooping. It was unwise. Some weeks before the above described event, my kids and I were riding back from town one night in my pickup. We passed through the Stratton area, and they wanted me to tell them the story of the Stratton Booger. I couldn't think of anything, so I just rolled my windows down and started hollering, "Here, Booger! Here, Booger!" It made them laugh, and we were having fun, driving slowly and rolling past a field of freshly mowed and baled hay. While storied legends are important to pass on to kids, in my opinion, it's even more important to show them the importance of solid and rational thought and reality. But the smell of the hay was wonderful. In the moonlight, I saw what looked like a large man thing running through the field, but it was kind of stooped. It really looked like a very large black orangutan, and it ran with incredible speed. My dome light was on, so I don't think my kids saw it, even though I could see it through my windshield. Humans don't run that fast. At least once, it leaped onto the top of the bale of hay, and it kept going, occasionally looking like it was pressing the ground with its hands or paws or whatever as it ran. It had to be about 200 yards away, and it slipped behind some trees ahead of us that bordered the right side of the road. It could have either run back across the field or crossed the road in front of us, but the road turned under those trees. The trees made a dark tunnel, as it were, in front of us. I rolled up the window, and I sped up. I hoped that I wouldn't hit it, but we didn't see anything. This was actually the incident that made me do some internet searches for the Stratton Booger and the like. From those searches, I saw examples of Bigfoot hunters doing their whoops and showed it to my cousin, and he dared me to try it. Perhaps in an effort to convince myself that the whole idea was silly, or perhaps out of curiosity, or to show that the dare was nothing, I tried it. I don't know why I took the dare, but all I can say to anyone even thinking about searching for these things, don't do that. No one needs to mess around with these things, whatever they are. Do not whoop at them. They do react to it. My uncles and grandfathers always used to say that the most dangerous thing in the woods is a man. That is only the case if the man has a good rifle. I know that now. If I or someone I know sees or hears any other evidence of these things around here and tells me about it, I'll send that to you. This is probably not our last time to experience their presence, even though I hope that it is. This email is sent to me by Gerald. He writes, I've learned a lot and sometimes been creeped out and sometimes amused by the Bigfoot encounters that you recite. I have never seen a Bigfoot, though, and it's not for lack of trying. I've spent a lot of time in the woods and forests of southern Indiana and northern Michigan. I do believe that I've been close to them on 2 occasions, and I leave it to you to decide if these are worth telling on your program. When I was attending Indiana University in Bloomington in the mid-1970s, friends and I would enjoy visiting the many wooded and wilderness areas around there. Brown County State Park, Morgan Monroe State Forest, Yellowwood State Forest, and McCormick's Creek State Park. I used to especially enjoy getting out to Brown County early as the sun came up because it was beautiful and you could see a lot of deer and small mammals. One time we even saw an elk, which we had been told there were no elk in Indiana, but there they were. This particular day was in April of 1977, and it was a Sunday morning. Because it was very early, and being Sunday, I did not call any friends to accompany me. The truth is also that I enjoyed the solitude and a lonely feeling of being in the woods by myself, silent and alive to the almost spiritual delight one finds there. I want to interject. That's why I love the woods. I don't like being there with anybody else. I prefer to hunt alone. I prefer to hike alone. I take my dogs, but they don't talk to me. You know what I mean? I don't have anybody yakking in my ear. And man, I'm with this guy 100%. That's the reason I love the woods. And you guys, just take a walk in the woods alone and just be quiet. Man, you get to see so many cool things that 95% of people who live in this country never see. We'll get back to the story now. I drove from Bloomington to the park and headed in deep to Lemon Lake, where an earthen dam had been created to back up a creek and create this man-made lake. There was a complex series of trails there on top of the ridges around the lake where you could see a lot of deer and small mammals, hear and see a lot of birds. I parked my car in a small lot by the dam. There were no other cars. The sun was just rising, though in the woods around the lake it was still pre-dawn and fairly dark. I started off across the dam to the trail that picked up on the far side of the dam, and it led up to a ridge and then looped back around the lake. I was halfway across the dam when over my left shoulder came a loud, tremendous roar, really a cross between a human bellow or a shout and an animal snarl or growl. I had never heard anything like this, and it rattled me because of that and because it was loud, and it was made by something really big. I stopped and stood looking back over to the left along the lake shore to see what had made this menacing roar. I couldn't see anything as I stood there in the calm and silence, and I wondered to myself, did I really hear that? I started off again, and immediately came another loud cry, and this time it really shook me up, because it was obvious that it had been made in my response to my movement. It also seemed to me that whatever had made the growl was closer and now closer to my vehicle than I was. I stood there for 10 minutes scanning the lake shore and the trees, trying to decide what to do. That was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Eventually, I pressed forward and reached the end of the dam and hiked up the trail to the ridge top. I did not hear the strange and menacing cry again. At the same time, as I hiked back on this trail, I did not see any deer. I didn't see or hear any of the smaller mammals, nor did I hear any birds. The forest was strangely and, to me, eerily quiet. I completed the hike, and when I had looped back around to where I believed the calls had come from, I found no tracks or any physical indication of what had made the sounds. At the time, I had only heard of Bigfoot as something that was to be found in California and in the Pacific Northwest. I had no notion of Midwest or Southern sightings. I do know that whatever made those frightening cries was large and unpleasant sounding, and it scared me badly. I never returned to Lemon Lake alone. The other time that I believe I may have been close to a Sasquatch was about 16 years ago in Michigan's Upper Peninsula at the Seney National Wildlife Refuge, a large and complex series of woodlands and wetlands, which is a real treat for anyone who enjoys seeing wildlife. The day we were there, June the 22nd, the longest day of the year, we saw deer, moose, beaver, and incredible numbers of birds. We were the last people there, and as we were walking back to my vehicle at sunset, the hairs on the back of my neck shot up, and I had this intense and uncomfortable feeling of being watched. It was alarming, though I did not say anything to Mary Ann because it was a ways yet to gain the vehicle, and I did not want to alarm her. I've spent time in the huge national forests of lower Michigan and never had such an intense, alarming premonition. You know, that is, I think a lot of people hear these screams and yells. Sometimes, just around my house, I write it off as cows or mules. There's a guy just down the road who's got several big animals, cows and mules, and I think he's got some donkeys and stuff. But man, sometimes they make noises that kind of ring through these woods and forests, and they don't sound like cows, and they don't sound like mules or donkeys. Do mules even make a noise? I don't even know. You know, you think of a donkey doing the hee-haw, and you think of a cow doing the moo, but you can tell that it's something, I don't know, I just write it off as, you know, some of that livestock. A lot of people hear these screams and growls and rumbles, and in one story I heard it talked about as a rolling, rumbling kind of a growl. To me, I've never heard it, but to me that sounds like what it would sound like, or that description is what, to me, is what it would sound like. But anyway, that's cool. And as far as the premonition, you know, I am a firm believer in trust your instincts, and that goes with anything. You know, if you, I don't know, there's times when you, I don't want to get too detailed here, but there's times when people will stab you in the back, and they will, they're about to betray you, or they are betraying you. It could be your wife, could be your husband, could be, you know, even your brother or your sister or a good friend. And you just, and if you're not a paranoid person, don't be paranoid. But if you're a rational person and you get that feeling, usually your instincts are right. And any instinct that provokes you or tells you to get out of an area, especially a place where you're alone or by yourself, I think you should get out. I understand that perfectly. I've had that happen before, not a lot, but just a few times, and I thought, and when I got out, you know, I couldn't really say what it was that could have been there that gave me this sixth sense to get out of there, but I listened to my instincts and I moved. All right, that was kind of a long video, and those stories were great, and I really appreciate the men who sent those in. Both of you, really, I know I say this all the time, that you write really well, but it means a lot to me when I get a story in that somebody has actually checked and proofread. Nobody writes a story from beginning to end and doesn't make a mistake. So when I get a story in the email, in my email account, and I can read from start to finish, and there's no errors that make me stumble as I narrate it, I know that person has gone back and checked their spelling, their punctuation, etc., etc. They've proofread it, made corrections, and it's ready to go. And I appreciate that so much, guys. You two guys that wrote these stories, A+ from the guy who really probably doesn't know how to write. But anyway, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for clicking and listening this long. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.